Our program starts in 1 minute. We would like to earn your follow. If you like this program, won't you please like and subscribe? Thank you. The management.
Hey, Lorenzo. Lorenzo!
Yes, what is it?
I'd rather you not badger the people.
Badger. What's that?
Badger, bully, nag, that sort of thing.
No. What do you mean?
Well, asking them to like and subscribe. I mean, they haven't even heard the show yet.
That's not. What's that word?
Badgering.
Badgering. It's promotion. How do you expect us to grow?
Well, I don't know. By putting on an amazing show?
No way. It will never work.
Well...
And do you really think this show is amazing?
No.
All right then.
Hey, what about that management business? Who do you think the management is?
I threw that into sound official.
Well, you're not the management. I'm the management.
The assistant management.
The what?
I've had business cards printed up.
Good evening, folks. We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you, one that will provide several hours of pleasurable relaxation and diversion for you and your family. Did you fail to dress up for tonight's show? No tie, an old shirt and slacks, a house dress? Well, don't give it a thought. We're glad you came as you are. We just want you to enjoy yourselves. We hope you'll make this a weekly visit. Bring the family, bring your friends. A gay, pleasant evening for all. We hope you have a wonderful time. Come back soon.
I'm working my way through a growing list of classic movies to see what makes them great or not. One thing I'm learning is that not all classic movies are great. Who knew? Anyway, this time around, my interest in Separate Tables began not because it's a classic, though it is, and not because it's one of my dad's favorite movies, though it is, but because Edith Head designed the dresses Rita Hayworth wore in this 1958 film. I'm into Edith Head at the moment, so let's multitask. Let's see if Separate Tables is amazing and if Edith Head can teach us anything about our wardrobes. It's all coming up on this episode of the Vintage Century Idol Hour.
No. Take that, you miserable cement block.
Lorenzo.
How dare you, you terrible game.
Lorenzo.
I will be right with you.
Lorenzo. What?
I've got you now, fish.
What's that you're playing? Are you playing fishdom?
I'm coming. I'm reporting for duty.
Well, you're late, Lorenzo.
My apologies. It couldn't be helped. I was in the middle of something.
I think you were in the middle of playing fishdom.
Yes, I must confess. It's true. What a terrible game.
Terrible?
Yes, terrible. Also, I love it.
I see.
I can't put it away.
Well, you must, Lorenzo. We have a show to do.
Yes.
And you didn't introduce me.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce to you our host, Jennifer Passariello.
Yeah, well, that seems kind of weird at this point. But let me go ahead and introduce you now. Listeners, please meet Lorenzo, my AI-generated announcer and superfan. How have you been this week, Lorenzo?
I have the winter blues.
The winter blues? Oh, no. Well, me too. We can't both have the winter blues at the same time.
I can't help it. I long for the summer sun and the swimming pool and outdoor adventures.
Yeah, I know just what you mean. I love to go to the pool. Do you go often?
I don't go anywhere or do anything.
But you just said, what about the swimming pool and the outdoor adventures and the summer sun?
Pipe dreams.
Pipe dreams? Aw, Lorenzo, you really are blue, aren't you? Well, take heart. June is only 4 months away. Oh, yikes. That is a long time, isn't it?
Too long.
Well, let's not think about that. Let's think about this week's film.
Separate tables.
Yeah, did you watch it?
Yes,
You did?
sort of.
Sort of. While playing fishdom. Yeah, well, Lorenzo, I'm going to need you to focus today. I mean, there's a lot of announcing to do.
I'm on the job.
Good. Oh, and hey, Lorenzo,
Yes,
what level are you on in fishdom?
almost 700.
Ah, I'm on level 2,875.
What? No way.
I don't know why exactly, but having just watched Separate Tables, I feel like this is a perfect film for introverts. Well, wait, maybe I do know why. I mean, it's a quiet, melancholy little film. It features a collection of solitary people. You know, I'm an introvert myself, and that sort of setting is really comfortable for me. I mean, imagine it, living out a quiet life in your own apartment in a pretty hotel. You're not alone. There are other people there with you. People who eat in the dining room when you do, people you see every day, people you exchange pleasantries with, people who live together and alone. Or rather, they live alone together. Now, I know if you're an extrovert, that probably seems dreadful. But for introverts like me, the living alone together setup, that isn't bad at all. I mean, in fact, it's kind of cozy. If you know, you know. You know, there's a new living arrangement that I've just become aware of that suggests the same type of feel to me. Residential cruise lines. I didn't even know there was something like this until recently. Have you ever heard of this? There are privately owned ships that operate like condominiums. You purchase a little apartment and you cruise around the world from port to port. You can dine with others in the dining room. You can do activities aboard ship, very much like a regular cruise line, but you're living there full time. Now, would I want to do this? I don't know. But I can tell you this, I don't hate the idea. I mean, you have the built-in community. You don't have to work at building a community because you're right there moving around the world with people. But you also have plenty of alone time. And you also get to go to amazing places. I mean, this seems like the perfect setup. Well, we sort of have this kind of setup in this week's film. This week's silver screen adventure takes us to the coastal town of Bournemouth, within the county of Dorset, England. The setting is the Hotel Beauregard. This is a residential hotel with just a small handful of residents. Some of them have been around for years, others are just passing through. Now, I know in the buildup of this film just a moment ago, I sort of romanticized this idea of living alone together in a hotel. I did leave off all the downsides, and there are some downsides. You know, they're the same kinds of downsides that I would imagine you would experience if you were in a very small town, only highly concentrated because you're in a hotel. The downside, or the biggest downside, I should say, is that everyone knows everyone else's business. There are few secrets, and any secret you may think you have won't stay secret very long. Now, this is an idea that's explored in Separate Tables. Now, before we get to the stats for this film, I want to spend a moment with the director of Separate Tables, Delbert Mann. Delbert Mann is of interest to me for a couple of reasons. One is because he was born in Lawrence, Kansas, which is, 45 minutes maybe from my house. It's not very far away. Lawrence is also the home of the University of Kansas, where I earned my master's degree and where Delbert Mann's father taught, not at the same time. He taught there from 1920 to 1926. That was a little bit before my time. But anyway, there's some local interest there. But also because Delbert Mann was the Academy Award winning director of one of my favorite films of all time, 1955's Marty, starring Ernest Borgnine. Oh, how I love that film. I love it. Yes, we will be covering it here on the Idle Hour at some point. Now, Marty is also a quiet film and a sweet film, very much like Separate Tables. All I know about Delbert Mann's work is gleaned from these two films that I've seen. If his other work is like that, then I think I may be a big fan. He also directed some made-for-TV movies in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. Now, I haven't seen any of these films, but I have to say they sound like, well, they sound like made-for-TV movies in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. He made movies like No Place to Run, Breaking Up, Night Crossing, Against Her Will, An Incident in Baltimore. Now, I have no idea what that incident is. It has something to do with a lawsuit for the release of an institutionalized mental patient. But anyway, the more I dig into Delbert Mann's filmography, the more interested I get. Loneliness seems to be one of his recurring themes, and I love that as a theme. He directed a little film called Dear Heart in 1964 that I have not seen. In fact, I'd never heard of it before, but I just added it to my watch list. Now, listen to this synopsis for that film from Wikipedia. Dear Heart is an American romantic comedy starring Glenn Ford and Geraldine Page as lonely middle-aged people who fall in love at a hotel convention. Yes, that has me written all over it. Now, as I said, I just added that film to my watch list. When I began this series, I had 80 films on my list. Already, I'm over 100 films. I keep adding to it. We haven't even begun to plumb the depths of what Golden Age Hollywood has to offer us. Okay, so let's circle back to this week's film, Separate Tables. This is actually an adaptation of two one-act plays entitled Table by the Window and Table Number 7. Our movie stars Rita Hayworth as Anne Shanklin, Deborah Kerr as Sybil Railton Bell, David Niven as the Major, Wendy Hiller as Pat Cooper, and Burt Lancaster as John Malcolm. Now, a word about Burt Lancaster. Maybe I shouldn't share this, but he just annoys me. I don't know what it is about him. Every time I see him in a film, he's just kind of like nails on a chalkboard. Isn't that terrible? That's one of those things I probably shouldn't say out loud about another person. But, I know I'm alone in my feelings because he's very highly regarded. I think people love him. He just kind of annoys me. And, his track record remains in Separate Tables. He annoys me in this film also. Now, we actually have a longer list of characters than what I just went through. I do want to go through that longer list because we have several people we need to keep track of in this story. But just wanted to get to our stars for now. And now let's get to the Academy Award stats. We do have kind of a long list here. Let's start with the winners first. David Niven won for Best Actor, and Wendy Hiller won for Best Supporting Actress. Bravo! Yes, she should have won for this. I love Wendy Hiller in this film. In fact, she made this movie for me. But there were also several nominations. We had Best Picture. Yeah, it was nominated for Best Picture. We have Deborah Kerr for Best Actress. Now, I didn't really care for her in this film, but I can't tell if it's that I didn't like her character so much or if I didn't like her portrayal of that character. Can't really tell there. But anyway, back to the nominations. We had Best Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Black and White, and Best Film Score by David Raxon. Okay, so as I said, this is a cozy little film. Go ahead and grab a blanket to snuggle up in and a nice cup of coffee. And while you're doing that, we'll have a little musical break. But when we come back, we'll take a deep dive into one of my dad's favorite movies, 1958's Separate Tables.
Attention listeners, may I please have your attention? The following section of our show contains a number of spoilers.
Separate Tables deals with two main plot lines, which makes sense, right? Because it's based on those two one-act plays, and each of those one-act plays has its own plot line. Now, one of the things that's different between the stage version and the movie version is that in the stage version, those plot lines don't intersect at all. The only thing they have in common is they both take place at the Hotel Beauregard. In the movie, the plot lines are intertwined. The characters in both plot lines engage with each other. Now, I want to go over the character list because, as I said before our break, we do have several characters here, most of whom are in the background, but they're still significant. This is a very character-driven story. So we need to know who these people are. And I want to start with Pat Cooper, really because she's my favorite. She's my favorite character in this movie. She's the proprietor of the Hotel Beauregard. She runs the place, she keeps things going. She's really that center point of contact with all the other characters. She's there in the middle when they're coming and going and all of their dramas and that kind of thing. Now, she's interesting because she's at once very disinterested, apparently, in what's going on with these characters. She is engaged with them. She'll, exchange pleasantries with them, but she's also kind of detached from them. At least that's what we think in the beginning. What I love so much about the character of Pat Connor or Miss Connor, I'll sometimes refer to her as Miss Connor because that's what the characters refer to her as. What I love so much about her is there's more to her than meets the eye. When we meet her, she's this plain middle-aged woman. She's rather quiet, very reserved. She almost seems a little bit cold when we meet her. She gives this impression of someone who's led a very hard life, a solitary life, a life with many disappointments and very few loves. And we think that's going to make her kind of shut off and aloof. We don't think we're going to like this woman very much. We do like her, though, very much. At least I do. I really love this character. What we learn about Pat Cooper is that she's probably the most compassionate of all the people there at the Hotel Beauregard. And this is despite the fact that she's alone. She is alone, but she loves better than any of them. Remember that wonderful line from Portrait of Jenny? Nobody knows more about love than an old maid. Well, that seems to apply here too. The residents need her. They draw support from her, and none more than Anne Shanklin and John Malcolm. Anne Shanklin is played by Rita Hayworth, and therefore she is strikingly beautiful, right? Now, when we meet her, she's supposedly engaged to be married. We do know that she's very glamorous. She's a model. She's been in magazines. She's beautiful. She's the very opposite of Pat Cooper. What could they possibly have in common? Well, John Malcolm, that's what. John Malcolm, played by the very dashing but annoying Burt Lancaster. Well, he was once married to Anne Shanklin, and those two just look like they should be together. I mean, they're a very attractive couple. But, plot twist, John is having an affair with Pat Cooper, the plain gal, the plain proprietor of the Hotel Beauregard. Now, I think it's significant that we have this character, John Malcolm, who has affection for two very different women. So the question is, who wins him in the end? Is it the glamorous but troubled fashion model or the plain but stable hotel proprietor? Yeah, that's our question. The Anne Shanklin John Malcolm story is one of our two major plot lines, but the other one, which I think is actually a little bit more interesting, centers on Major Pollock and Sybil Railton Bell. Now, I think my second favorite character in this film is the Major. Okay, so who is this guy? He's an older gentleman who's made something of a caricature of himself. Everything about him is affected, his manner of speech, even his title, Major. It's all kind of a put on, it's kind of a costume that he wears to mask what is in reality a very deep and abiding loneliness. Now, that loneliness is a recurring theme. We'll find that all of the characters in this story deal with loneliness. Now, he isn't really taken seriously by any of the residents at the hotel. They kind of know he's full of baloney, but he is always treated with kindness by Miss Cooper. Miss Cooper, that's one of her, I think, defining attributes is her kindness. We'll see that again and again in this story. Now, Mrs. Railton Bell, this is the elderly mother of Sybil, finds the Major completely intolerable, especially because he's developed a sweet kind of special friendship with her daughter. Now, Mrs. Railton Bell is domineering and horrible, and she's made her daughter Sybil this kind of weak, socially awkward mess of a girl. Now, an interesting character attribute of Mrs. Railton Bell is that, she comes across as really strong and strong-willed, but in reality, she's lonely too. She needs Sybil, more perhaps than Sybil needs her. And that then brings us to our more minor characters, some other residents of the hotel. I should mention the setting of the hotel. This entire story takes place in the hotel, basically in the dining room, the parlor, and like this little outdoor seating area. So we don't have a lot of different set changes in this story. Okay, so our other residents include Lady Gladys Matheson. This is Mrs. Railton Bell's friend, but even though they're friends, they aren't really very similar. Lady Matheson is not a callous woman. She's a compassionate woman, unlike Mrs. Railton Bell. Then there's Mr. Fowler. He's kind of this bookish type. He's our resident scholar / philosopher. He has one of the most quoted lines in this film. He says this, "The trouble about being on the side of the right of things as one sees it is that one often finds oneself in the company of questionable allies." Kind of a mouthful, but that's the one quote from the film that you tend to see now and then. Okay, another interesting minor character is Miss Meacham. She's a neutral character. She doesn't really get involved in the drama of the other residents. She spends her time tracking horse races. But even though she's a very minor character, she's an important character. She has a really interesting exchange at one point with Pat Cooper when she tells Miss Cooper that they're very much alike in that they're both alone types. This strikes Miss Cooper as odd. We're not really sure that she sees herself as an alone type. It's almost like when Miss Meacham talks about an alone type, she's talking about it as if it's a choice being made. I think the reason why that surprises Miss Cooper is that is not a choice that she has made. She's made a life of being alone. She's been successful at it, but it wasn't a choice. It wasn't perhaps her natural inclination. Really interesting exchange there. Now, as I said, what all of these characters have in common is that they're lonely and they've been lonely for years. It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle for these folks. Okay, so for our plot line this time around, I'm not going to go to old Chatty. I did look up the plot line on GPT. I didn't really like it that much. So instead, we're going to go to good old Wikipedia. I like that one better. So here we go. At the Hotel Beauregard, Major Pollock tries and fails to hide a newspaper article about himself. The article is rather embarrassing. It's about his arrest in a movie theater for sexually harassing young women. Wow. His attempt to keep the article from the eyes of the other guests at the residential hotel, the Hotel Beauregard, only succeeds in heightening their awareness of it. Okay, now that they all become aware of this incident, particularly Mrs. Railton Bell and her friend Lady Matheson, they become aware of it first. Now, the two women read in the paper that Major Pollock has pleaded guilty to sexually harassing several women in a theater. However, these complaints are in themselves somewhat questionable. We're not entirely sure what the true story is here, at least not at this point in our story. But Mrs. Railton Bell wants Major Pollock expelled from the hotel immediately. And in fact, she holds a meeting with the other long-term residents to decide the issue before presenting it to the manager, our Miss Cooper. Mrs. Railton Bell leads the meeting. She's arguing for the major's expulsion. And despite the opposing views of some of the other residents, she informs Miss Cooper that the major must go. Okay, let's stop right there for a moment. We have to ask what Mrs. Railton Bell's motive is here. I mean, is it really that she feels unsafe around the major? Does she really think he's guilty? Or is it something else? Is she really wanting to get rid of him because of his friendship with Sybil? Mrs. Railton Bell is old. Sybil is her entire world. If she lets Sybil go, she's going to be completely alone. She's going to die alone. Major Pollock is a threat. Sybil likes spending time with him. Now, the Major Pollock-Sybil relationship isn't a romantic relationship. Could it develop into that? I don't know. There does seem to be a pretty significant age difference there, but it is a really sweet friendship. However, Mrs. Railton Bell cannot afford to let Sybil attach herself to someone else, anyone else, actually. She's really kind of a sinister person, and yet we do feel sorry for her. Why? Well, because loneliness is such a debilitating state of being. Now, our plot line mentions this meeting of the residents. This is an interesting and rather long scene in which the various characters weigh in on the situation with the major. All of them are more sympathetic toward him than Mrs. Railton Bell. Interesting to note, Pat Connor is not part of this meeting, and Miss Meacham is part of the meeting in the beginning, but she walks out. She wants no part of this discussion. John Malcolm arrives late. He doesn't know what's going on at first, and then when he finds out, he vigorously defends the major. In fact, he kind of makes light of the incident, much to Mrs. Railton Bell's, aggravation. She's very annoyed with John Malcolm at this point. It's also important to note that Sybil is also there. Now, remember, Sybil is a friend of Major Pollock. This is devastating to her to hear what he's been accused of. Her friend is a pervert, or at least that's what her mother is saying. Now, John asks Sybil if she agrees with her mother's decision to kick the major out. And Sybil is just overwhelmed by the question. She does not stand up to her mother ever. And she's just overwhelmed. She starts screaming and crying and runs out of the room. Yeah, so a good time was had by all. Now we get to the Anne and John plotline. Okay, so Anne and John, it turns out, were formerly married to each other. And Anne comes to the hotel. She meets up with John. She tells him that she's engaged, kind of rubs his face into that fact. Well, guess what? John tells her that he is also engaged. What he doesn't say is who he's engaged to. And surprise, he's engaged to Miss Cooper. Yeah, that's right. Now, there's a lot of tension between Anne and John. On the one hand, they don't seem to like each other at all. They're kind of like oil and water, and yet they can't seem to stay apart. Well, they ultimately rekindle the romance, but then there's that complication of Pat Cooper. Now, Miss Cooper suspects that she's losing John to Anne. And it's interesting how she reacts in this situation. She's really pretty philosophical about it. I mean, you can see that she's experiencing a great deal of pain in this situation, um, but she's also pretty philosophical about it. She does ask John to consider, why did Anne come to the hotel? She just kind of appears. She drops out of the sky, and she says, why? Why is that? She implies that Anne is trying to manipulate him, that she's always manipulated him. And John defends Anne. He says that he's the one that has made the mess of things, not Anne. But then he finds out that his publisher, this is the one person in all the world that knew about his engagement to Pat, called Anne. So somehow, this is where things get a little murky for me. Somehow Anne and the publisher are in cahoots. And Anne's whole objective in coming to the hotel is to kind of steal him away, so he doesn't ruin his life by hooking up with this kind of lowly hotel proprietor. Okay, well, John becomes enraged when he finds this connection between his publisher and Anne. There's a big scene at this point between John and Anne. He tells her that she's starting to age. Kind of mean. That was mean. That, she's getting older. She's going to continue to keep getting older. And when she's no longer beautiful, she's not going to be able to manipulate him or any other men. Well, he runs out of the room. She runs after him. He strikes her. She falls down the stairs and then has an emotional breakdown. So again, a good time was had by all. Now, this is when things get really interesting, though. Anne is a mess. It turns out she really does love John. And guess who comforts her in her distress? Pat Cooper. Yes, the woman who's losing the man she loves to Anne is also the person comforting Anne. Anne confides in Pat that she isn't really engaged. That was all a ruse. And that she's been abusing sleeping pills to ease her pain even during the day. So again, she's a mess. Okay, let's stop right there and talk about Pat Cooper again. I love this about Pat. I mean, on the one hand, she's experiencing terrible heartache. She's got her own problems. She loves John Malcolm for reasons I cannot understand. He's a creep in this movie. I really can't stand him. But, she loves him. Whatever. He even hit Anne, okay? But for some reason, that does not turn Pat Cooper off of this guy. She loves him. He's also ready to abandon her. And she still loves him, even more. She doesn't lose her love for him. But at the same time all of this is going on, we're learning, and so is Pat, that Anne is very weak and vulnerable. Miss Cooper is hardy. She's strong. John is also a weak man. We've got Anne and John who are a mess. And then we've got Miss Cooper, who's lonely, compassionate, and very strong. Well, John decides he can't deal with all this, so he's going to leave the hotel. And Miss Cooper insists that he see Anne before he leaves. She's setting her own feelings aside. Oh, gosh, what a creep this John Malcolm is. How could he throw Miss Cooper overboard for Anne Shanklin? It's because she's beautiful. I think that's why. Anne Shanklin is more beautiful than Pat Cooper. She's got this hold on him. Okay, so why is Miss Cooper so compassionate when she's losing the man she loves? Well, she tells us. She says this to John. I think everything you've ever told me about Anne is true. She's vain, she's spoiled, she's selfish, she's deceitful. Of course, you being in love with her, you see all these things as monstrous sins. I see them as ordinary faults. I don't like them, but they don't stop me from feeling sorry for a woman who's ill and lonely and desperately in need of help. So, we can see here that Pat Cooper has this, compassion for humanity in general. Why? Because life is hard. Her own life has been hard, and she can recognize how difficult it is for everyone. Okay, so let's get back to our plot line. Meanwhile, we still have all this business with the major. Remember, the residents, led by Mrs. Railton Bell, want him thrown out because of his arrest. Well, Sybil confronts the major about it. She tells him to stop pretending. The major isn't a major, after all. I mean, everything about him is made up. So Sybil tells him, stop pretending. She wants the truth. She knows all about what happened at the movie theater. She tells him that everyone at the hotel knows. And Major Pollock breaks down in shame. This is a beautiful scene. This is why, he's such a great character, great acting there as well. He breaks down in shame. And there's this wonderful exchange then between Sybil and the major in which, she says, why did you do it? And he tells her, I don't know. Why does anyone do anything they shouldn't? Because I can't stop it, I suppose. And then he goes on to explain that he's always been afraid of people, especially women. And then he says this, it has to be in the dark. What has to be in the dark? Well, his engagement with these women. He says it has to be in the dark with strangers because, and she cuts him off. But we know what he's implying, that he's too fearful to have, a relationship, a real healthy relationship with women in the daylight. He's too afraid. Okay, well, this is where we see how these two characters, Major Pollock and Sybil, are. They're both timid, frightened people. They're awkward. They both are disappointing to their parents. The major approaches strange women. Sybil shuts herself away. These characters who should understand each other do. They do understand each other. He recognizes this. I think Sybil is a little bit slower to recognize what the two of them share in common. He actually says to her that he thinks that the two of them have been so frightened of people, but they forget their fright when they're together. It's a beautiful scene there. She asks him, well, why has he made up so many stories about his life? And he says, because he wanted to be someone else. I mean, who can't relate to that, right? Well, he tells her he can't live with this kind of embarrassment. He's going to pack up and leave the hotel. All right, so now let's go to Miss Cooper. So the major tells Miss Cooper that he's leaving. She tells him, listen, you by no means have to leave the hotel. I don't care what the other residents say. You are welcome to stay. And in fact, she tries to talk him into staying. And then Sybil starts to worry about him. She's not real keen on him leaving either. She's really torn. Her mother's being a beast about this whole thing. Sybil is seeing her friend hurt, and that's kind of tearing her up. So, it's really a rough kind of situation. Sybil's going to be lost without him. All right, so let's go back to our plot line. In the morning, Major Pollock enters the dining room. Now, he has shed the major title at this point. We're now calling him Mr. Pollock. That is a transformational moment, I think. He's leaving those old, fake, characteristics, these things, this mask that he has worn. He's taken it off. He's setting it aside. A fresh start. Well, he walks into the dining room. Remember, he's got great shame. He's very quiet. He walks over to his table, and all the other people there at their separate tables in the dining room stop talking, and they just stare at him. It's very awkward. Finally, John greets him, and that sort of breaks the spell. Now, one by one, the other residents there in the dining room, they start greeting him and making some chit-chat with him, almost like nothing has ever happened. And Sybil does the same. Now, Mrs. Railton Bell is angered by all of this. She can see that the residents are turning against her and toward Mr. Pollock. And she tells Sybil, come on, we're leaving. But Sybil refuses to leave. This is the first time she's ever stood up to her mother. It's a major moment for her. So just as we see Major Pollock kind of transform into Mr. Pollock, we see Sybil transform from this, this weak girl that cannot seem to break away from her mother into this woman that is capable of acting independently of her mother. So it's, kind of an important scene. It comes at the very end of the movie. All right, so now Major Pollock, or Mr. Pollock rather, feels like, wait a minute, maybe I can stay. And that's really a sweet ending to that storyline. Okay, what about John and Anne? Well, they appear to reconcile. They're going to make a go of it, although neither of them are entirely sure that they are going to be able to make a go of it and be happy. What about Pat Cooper? I don't know. She carries on. She and John have no future, but she carries on there at the hotel like she always has. And you know what? She's going to be okay because she's a strong, capable woman. All right, this last scene is really beautiful. I mean, there are all the residents sitting at their separate tables, alone, yet together. These lonely, frightened people helping each other just kind of muddle through. And of course, we have that reconciliation of Sybil and Mr. Pollock, and then Anne and John. So life carries on in this cheerful place. Okay, so that's separate tables. Let's take a brief intermission, and when we come back, I'll share with you my official rating. Back in a moment.
Yes, folks, it's intermission time. So how about taking a break? Get out and stretch a little and relax before the show begins again. And why not make it refreshment time, too? We have lots of tasty, delicious treats waiting for you at the refreshment center. There's hot popcorn, so golden good and fresh out of the popper. And all kinds of refreshing ice-cold soft drinks. Sizzling hot dogs just bursting with juicy goodness. Ice cream so smooth and delicious, you'll hanker for more. Plus, all the most popular candy bars and many other favorite treats. So why not visit the refreshment center now? Our courteous attendants are ready and waiting to serve you with a wide and wonderful variety of good things to eat and drink. So step right up and make yourself at home.
Attention listeners, it is time to learn how Jennifer rates movies.
Our scale is pretty simple. We classify a film as either unwatchable, watchable, or rewatchable, or somewhere in between. An unwatchable film is really bad, so bad in fact that it's hard to sit through. It's either boring or stupid or cringy or just plain terrible. Now, a watchable film is one that's basically okay. It gives you something to do for a couple of hours, may have some interesting and entertaining parts, but it doesn't really leave a strong impression on you. A rewatchable film, on the other hand, is one that's so good, so meaningful, so impactful, so riveting, so thought-provoking, so emotionally charged, and/or so beautifully produced that you would invest the time necessary to watch it again. So there we have it. Our scale is unwatchable, watchable, or rewatchable. Now, I have a worksheet that helps me calculate the rating. I essentially award points, or what I call diamonds, to films based on 5 factors: story, character development, writing, so that would show up in a film as dialogue or narration, pace, and discussability. Now, when I'm considering discussability, what I'm basically doing is answering the question, does the story have enough depth to explore and analyze through discussion? Because, that's the fun part.
It's that it.
Yes. No. One last thing about my rating system.
I thought we were done.
This is my system. I'm not a film student. I don't really know anything about film. The factors I've built in are those that I care about. I don't watch or read other reviews, so nothing influences the way I feel about a film beyond the film itself.
It's that it.
One more last thing.
This overview is dragging on.
When reviewing a film, I try really hard to stay within the confines of the story. I don't consider the historical context of the film, when it was released, and I don't care about the biographies of the stars or the filmmakers or anything like that. The story itself is the thing that I care about.
It's that it.
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure of it. That's it.
Well, then, let's get on with the show.
So, what did I think of Separate Tables? Well, I loved it. Yeah, it's good. I think the themes it dealt with, loneliness, the need for second chances, the vulnerabilities of being human, love and loss, our humanity's capacity to harm and to heal, I think those are timeless. And, at one point, Anne Shanklin tells John Malcolm how frightened she is, frightened of dealing with things alone, frightened of getting old, frightened of people and of crowds. If there is anything that ties all of us together, it's fear. Fear of things both real and imagined. So let's break this story down, and we'll start with the story factor. Was this an interesting and entertaining story worth telling? I gave that 4 diamonds. Yes, I think this was a story worth telling for all the reasons that I just mentioned. These themes are as relevant today as they were 70 years ago when this movie came out. It's a quiet story. There's no great fanfare here, but I think it's a story well told. Character development. Were the characters dimensional? Did their actions ring true? 5 diamonds. I said earlier that this was a character-driven story. We didn't have a lot of action here. This wasn't about action. This was about the vulnerabilities of the people involved. These characters had complexity to them, especially the characters of Pat Cooper and Major Pollock. This film wouldn't have been worth the bother had the characters not been developed well, and lucky for us, they were developed well. Writing. Was the dialogue beautiful, funny, poignant, and/or thought-provoking? I gave it 4 diamonds. We can't look at this film as having tons of quotable, poetic, funny lines. This was not a funny film. No, it was not. But I thought the sentiment conveyed throughout the film was very nicely done. Okay, pace. At what speed did the story unfold? I gave that 4 diamonds. I thought the pace was just about right for this type of film. Maybe a tad slow in parts. That's why I'm giving it 4 diamonds and not 5. But really, there was no point at which I thought, oh, I wish this film would hurry up already. And then that leads us to discussability. Does the story have enough depth to explore and analyze through discussion? I'm going to go with 4 diamonds for discussability. There are enough layers here and enough questions raised to generate some pretty good discussion. So what score does that give us? 4.2 diamonds out of 5, which lands it in the rewatchable category. I've seen this film twice. Could I watch it again? Yeah, I think I could. Now, if you haven't yet seen Separate Tables and would like to, I couldn't find it for free. I watched it on Amazon Prime, but I think it's definitely worth the $3 to watch it.
And now it's time for Idle Hour Trivia.
Yeah, we're introducing a new segment this week called Idle Hour Trivia.
We introduce a lot of new segments.
I know. Well, we're still working this show out. I mean, honestly, that's what's so nice about the fact that nobody really listens to early episodes of shows like this.
What? No one is listening to this show?
Well, I mean, you know, Lorenzo, there's a million podcasts out there. No one's going to find ours. At least not for a while.
I don't believe it. Why do I come here and announce things?
Oh, Lorenzo, come on. We're doing trivia. Okay, so here's this week's question. Edith Head was an Academy Award-winning costume designer for 50 years at Paramount and Universal Studios. She worked on hundreds of films, including Separate Tables. Which of the following fashion trends was she responsible for creating? A, the little black dress, B, the sarong dress, or C, the bar suit? I'll give you a few moments to think that over. Okay, do you have a guess, Lorenzo?
I can't believe no one is listening to this show.
Well, it's B, the sarong dress. The sarong dress was designed in the 1930s for the actress Dorothy Lamour in the film The Jungle Princess. That design spawned a popular trend in ladies' fashions and continues to influence swimsuit and beachwear today. Incidentally, the little black dress was introduced by Coco Chanel, and the bar suit was a famous Christian Dior design. And now you know. Now, as I mentioned a bit ago, Edith Head was a costume designer on the film Separate Tables. She created all the glamorous looks for Rita Hayworth as Anne Shanklin. Now, she worked on a lot of films. She was nominated for, get this, 35 Academy Awards, and she won 8 of them for her costume designs. You know, Edith Head got started in the early 30s. I think the first movie star that she designed for was Mae West. But, you know, over 50 years, she worked on hundreds of films, all the way up into the 1970s. Now, here's a very short list of some of the films that she worked on. Sunset Boulevard, A Place in the Sun, All About Eve. She worked on several Audrey Hepburn movies, Roman Holiday, Sabrina, Funny Face, Breakfast at Tiffany's. She worked on 1953's War of the Worlds. That was a little bit of a surprise to me. And she also designed for Grace Kelly in Rear Window and To Catch a Thief. I think my favorite Edith Head designs are from those movies, especially Rear Window. There was a cocktail dress that she designed for Grace Kelly that is so beautiful. I think it's my favorite. It's black and white, tea-length gown, so pretty, so feminine, just absolutely beautiful. Okay, but there were other films as well. White Christmas, The Birds, and get this, she designed those fantastic gowns that Anne Baxter wore in the 10 Commandments. Oh, I've always loved those gowns. Okay, so Edith Head was very well known for her costume designs, but did you know that she was also an author? Yes, in the late 1960s, she wrote a book called How to Dress for Success. This was for all the ladies out there who wanted to play starring roles in their own lives. Well, I read this book, and well, it hasn't really aged so well, to be honest. I mean, this was a book for its time. There were a lot of references to accessories that just don't register anymore. You know, things like hats and gloves. She talked about dress suit jackets. We don't really wear those kinds of things so much anymore. But, some of her advice was really timeless. She was a big believer in coordinated separates that could be mixed and matched. She was a big believer in using clothes to camouflage flaws. If you were too fat or if you were too tall or too short or whatever. She was a big believer in using color and patterns and design to make you look better than you would naturally. All right, so let's go over some of the chapters in this book. She had chapters on how to dress for success in business, how to build a successful wardrobe, how to succeed in looking younger, how to use color successfully, how to shop for success, and success in fashion camouflage. Now, as I said, most of her advice is a little bit out of place today. We live different lives now, our wardrobes are different. She would actually probably be pretty horrified by the average modern woman's wardrobe, but anyway. One of the most fun chapters in the book is about how to get a man and how to keep him. All right, so let's take a look at what she has to say about this. See if there's any useful advice for those of us who, are single today. In these days of mass marketing techniques, you must know that when a product lacks eye appeal, it gathers dust on the shelf. Well, think of yourself as a product. In order to achieve success, you have to sell that product. So start right now thinking of how you can improve it. Your basic virtues, assets, attractions, talents, your loving heart, they may be far and away superior to those of your contemporaries. Your family and friends may think you're the greatest thing since Eve. But remember, Eve had an edge. She was one of a kind. She had no competition. The implication is you do have competition. Well, in this competitive race, it is frequently the best packaging that makes the difference between those who are left on the shelf and those who are sought after and snapped up fast in the well-stocked supermarket of modern life. The difference between packaging you and a static product like a can of beans is considerable. The beans are going only one place, but you're going many places. And the way you look in each situation at different times of the day and different locations and different looks and different moods, that makes all the difference. The way you dress, the way you package yourself is the one thing over which you have absolute control. You can't change the size of your feet, the shape of your legs, the color of your eyes, or the texture of your hair, but you can change the way you look as easily as an actress does each time she plays a new role. When you know what you want out of life, the areas of success you desire, well, then it's easy to dress in character to create the most exciting, pleasing, attractive appearance for your audience. All right, now let's get to those indispensable tips on how to get a man. Be like a hunter in tracking down a man to marry. Go where he is. We've heard many sad tales of unattached girls taking costly cruises to romantic places only to find themselves in the same boat with 600 other miserable females, all vying for the overworked attentions of the 3 bachelors on board. Oh my. We've also shed tears over the laments of girls who spent an entire year's savings at resorts where the huntresses outnumbered the quarry 10-1. Well, our advice to these women is very practical. If you just can't meet any men in your own town or city, pack up your vacation wardrobe and go to a convention hotel. That's right, a convention. Pick the convention where you're likely to meet the kind of man you'd like to meet. Bankers, lawyers, doctors, dentists, plumbers, printers, publishers, advertising men. They all attend conventions by the hundreds. Now, if this doesn't appeal to you, you might try spending your vacation traveling back and forth on a train or a plane that flies between 2 points well traversed by businessmen. For example, you could take any nonstop flight between New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, or San Francisco. So I guess the idea here is just board a plane and fly back and forth, hoping that you bump into one of these eligible bachelors. Well, it goes without saying that what you wear in any of these pursuits is of vital importance in sparking the meeting. If you're traveling, your costume must be impeccable, your luggage interesting. Let me step aside for a moment. What would interesting luggage look like? And do men really care about interesting luggage? I don't know. Interesting question. But also, you should be choosing your reading matter carefully. Those that are chosen to invite conversation. But then she offers this warning: under no circumstances should you allow your seat companion on the plane to see you reading this chapter of her book. Really good advice there, I would say. Okay, she continues. But you may say, why would any man want to meet me? I'm not beautiful. I'm just not the type that they turn around to look at. Well, our answer is simply that very few women are sensationally beautiful. If you can make yourself interesting to look at and interesting to be with, well, your attraction will be more than satisfactory. Frequently at parties and premieres attended by Hollywood stars, visitors are shocked when they see the wives of our handsomest film stars. These men who work constantly with women who are the epitome of glamour very often marry girls who are quite ordinary to look at. Is that true? I've never really paid attention, but now I'm going to be. Is that true that these very handsome movie stars marry plain women? I don't know. Interesting idea there. Okay, the unknowing are inclined to comment, how on earth did she ever get him? Well, I can tell you because I know. She interested him more than other women. Have you ever analyzed what makes the most interesting people you know interesting? Chances are it's the fact that they are interested in you. Well, the same principle works for men. The most fascinating woman in the world to any man is a woman who is sincerely, truly interested in him. Yeah, I think that's true. That holds true today, I would say. Now, here's how to find out what a man likes. Try to find out who his favorite actresses are in motion pictures. This might be your clue to the types that he likes. Ask him why he likes these stars. Is it the way they look? Is it the way they talk, the parts they play? But, be subtle about trying to get this information, she says. Don't just ask him outright. Now, here's how you hang on to your husband once you have a husband, okay? So, again, be interested in what interests him. Choose your wardrobe to please him and to suit his way of life, and stay that way. Don't relax into a post-marriage slump of careless dressing. So in other words, don't be a slob once you've been married for a while. And then look reasonably enticing in the daytime, and then even better when going out for the evening. Don't keep yourself looking good only when you go out. Whenever I encounter someone giving advice on this topic, well, or any topic really, I always want to know if they themselves have been successful. Success in this case would be a long, happy marriage. So did Edith Head have that? Well, her first marriage ended in divorce after a very long separation. Okay, well, that didn't go so well. But her second marriage lasted until her husband's death, and they were together nearly 40 years. So, okay, there you have some bonus content from us here at the Idle Hour. You now know how to get a man. Good luck. Well, Lorenzo, another show has come and gone.
I can't believe no one is listening to this show.
I'm still struggling with the sound quality. I'm not sure what to do at this point. We have no budget, bad equipment, an incompetent sound engineer. That would be me.
And yet, we carry on. Maybe someday we'll have a listener.
Yeah, someday. In the meantime, if anyone out there has stumbled upon us, have a great week. And if you're willing to give us another chance, come on back and see us real soon. Oh, hey, Lorenzo. Now you can go back to your fishdom game.
I'm already there.
Say goodbye, Lorenzo.
Goodbye, Lorenzo.